So this is the episode where we're going to look at 3 movies: Duck Soup, Diplomaniacs, and $1 Million Legs. Once again, I, of course, am here with my usual co-host, Mr. Joe Dater. Are you there? I don't see him, actually.
Hello, Mr. and Mrs. America and all the ships at sea.
Nice.
You know,
I like it.
We're going back to the 1930s, and gosh darn it, if you can cosplay for these things, so can I.
Yeah, I didn't cosplay
for my 1930s cosplay as best as I can do it in my apartment with what I had available to me. I look more like a man from the 1930s than I expected to.
I can't believe I'm not actually in a time machine.
I feel like a man from the 1930s.
Yeah.
And with very little of a nudge it needed to bring me to the 1930s. So here's what we're doing today. When we did our episode about the Marx Brothers animal crackers, we mentioned that the Marx Brothers movie Duck Soup, which was kind of a political satire, had been released around the same time as 2 other comedies, which both had a sort of a political theme. And one of them was the W.C. Fields movie $1 Million Legs, and another one was the movie Diplomaniacs with Wheeler and Woolsey. And so we decided, let's talk about all 3 of those as a triple feature. Let's watch all 3 of them, which we did.
And they're only about an hour each, by the way. They're only about an hour. Just slightly,
exactly. This was back in,
just topping out over an hour. Yeah.
Back in my time, they used to show 2 movies, a newsreel, and a cartoon, and that was your night out at the movies. So the movies tended to be short. They were under 80 minutes. It's a good deal. You get a lot for your nickel.
Yeah. So after you mentioned that those 3 movies kind of linked together, I looked it up and saw that other people referenced those 3 movies as like
all the time.
A weird little trio. Yeah, weird little trio.
It's like an unofficial trio. I mentioned it to a friend of mine, and that was the first thing he thought of. He said, "Oh yeah, you should watch all 3 of those together."
Yeah, and I had actually coincidentally myself seen $1 Million Legs, probably because Harpo's bride is in that. Mrs. Harpo Marx is in that. So
that's the W.C. Fields movie. $1 Million Legs does co-star Susan Fleming, who went on to become Mrs. Harpo Marx, and they were happily married until his death.
Absolutely,
which is a lovely Hollywood love story.
Now I didn't know that Diplomaniacs was crazy hardcore, what you might call rip-roaring racist.
Let's just say, let's start talk with Diplomaniacs.
Let me say
I want to go from bad to good.
Let's argue about this, because I wanted to start with $1 Million Legs. So here's the order of which they came out. Duck Soup came out 3rd out of all of these.
That's right. Yeah.
So the first one to come out was $1 Million Legs, came out July 8th, 1932. Came out actually the year before. Diplomaniacs came out April 29th, 1933. And then Duck Soup, November of 33. 2 of these movies are written by the same guy. Joseph Mankiewicz is credited as writing both $1 Million Legs and Diplomaniacs.
Now, his brother Herman, the legendary Mank of Netflix fame,
who wrote Citizen Kane.
Who co-wrote Citizen Kane and was a producer on $1 Million Legs, Duck Soup as well. See, I wanted to talk about Diplomaniacs first because I wanted to get it out of the way. Let's just say, so first thing, interesting fact about Diplomaniacs is it has a lot in common with the movie King Kong. It came out in 1933. It's an RKO film. It was produced by Marion C. Cooper. And it's got tons of racism. So very much like the classic King Kong.
All right, let's start with that. Okay, Diplomaniacs. Now, I did not know about Wheeler and Woolsey. I didn't know about them. They were huge in their day. They were up there with Laurel and Hardy.
I know.
Now, you can imagine they were kind of, now I'm going to offend a lot of people, but they were kind of the Adam Sandler, I would say. Like they were kind of, or maybe even as the Pauly Shore. I don't know. What would you compare them to?
Having now seen one of their films, and one is the most I ever want to see, I would compare them not even to, because Sandler has done movies I like. I would put Wheeler and Woolsey, and I know they have their big fans. My friend Paul, they're his favorite. He adores them. He loves them.
Wow.
But honestly, they're up there for me with the ShamWow guy as like a comedy figures. Yeah. So So I watched Diplomaniacs, and I'm going to give an impression now of the experience of watching Diplomaniacs. This is the experience of watching Diplomaniacs. It starts out, okay. Oh, God. Oh, man. Oh, God. Oh, man. You turn into Ryan O'Neal in Tough Guys Don't Dance when you watch this movie.
If there's something really odd about this movie, and it's because the sense of humor was different back then.
And you had to open a barber shop on an Indian reservation.
Didn't you tell me to open up a place where we'd have no customers?
Did I say no customers or no competitors?
Doesn't make any difference. We haven't got either.
You don't suppose we could find some way to grow whiskers on these Indians, do you?
I'd just as soon try growing a beard on a billiard ball.
I did it once.
Grew a beard on a billiard ball? What did that get you?
I sold it for a coconut.
So that's what I find fascinating about doing this show. This is so much fun doing this podcast because it is so much fun to go back in history and ponder how different the sense of humor was. And to me, this shows it a lot more than the Marx Brothers. Now, I want to apologize to Animal Crackers. I apologize to Animal Crackers as far as my saying the plot was not that great, okay? I'm now sort of realizing the plot of Animal Crackers, and this was done by Pulitzer Prize winning writers. That was sophisticated. That was actually quite sophisticated for that time, and it's just, I was just comparing it to Knives Out. Like, I gotta not do that.
If you go into Diplomaniacs thinking, okay, maybe I can just enjoy the silliness and the mayhem and dismiss the 1930s casual racism, you can't.
It's hard. So
because it's the first thing on the screen.
Yeah. Now, so to put it in perspective, we're talking a lot of racism.
A lot.
We're not
just
wall
to wall. The whole movie starts out predicated on a racist joke about indigenous Americans.
So Native Americans. So it starts with Native Americans. Now, they call them their brothers. They kind of ultimately treat them with respect. They don't at the beginning, but they come off as the buffoons who are not getting how sophisticated Native Americans are.
But the whole joke is,
I'll give them that.
But the whole joke is they're going broke because they were stupid enough to open a barber shop on an Indian reservation. And because everyone knows that Native Americans do not grow whiskers and never need to shave.
I guess in 1932, 33, this was a trope that they don't grow hair on their face.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a new one to me.
No.
But apparently the audience would have been nodding
that would have been laughing at recognition. And then, of course, we're treated to many, many scenes of the Indian reservation featuring not one Native American actor.
It's, we assume we can't tell there's a lot of people. So
only stage one of the racism here. There's at least two stages above it that are going to come later.
And so one of the worst things is also that there's only one word any Native American ever says, which is oompa.
Oompa. Yeah, right. They speak in one word like Groot from the Avengers.
Until you meet their chief who went to Oxford.
See if he can speak any English.
Wait a minute. I'll try him out with something simple.
You speak of English? Not very fluently. I was at Oxford for 4 years, and though I'm fairly conversant with the classics, my ear has not yet become attuned to your Americanisms.
So I thought that was
funny
the movie making fun of itself and saying, no, these people go to college and all that stuff. So I thought that was like, all right, I'll give you that movie. I'll give you that.
There are a few things I'll give it. I'll give it.
So
that.
the chief shows up in a Rolls Royce and he went to Oxford and he's, very sophisticated guy, but it's the Reverdy. There's been so many oompas that it's really hard. It's really hard to put all that together in your brain. You've already got all this cognitive dissonance.
I'll give the movie one other thing. Like all three of these movies, it's pre-code. So the chorus girls, very scantily clad. I was happy with the chorus girls. And I'm right now in the 1930s, so I can say that.
Now, let me go backwards. I just want to say also, all right, so, the music in this, there's a lot of musical numbers. The music was by Calmer and Ruby. They were Marx Brothers songwriters, and they wrote, Marx Brothers movies. They were huge, big buddies of the Marx Brothers. And,
I like the songs. The songs, musical numbers were fine.
They wrote music for several Wheeler and Woolsey movies. So Calmer and Ruby are back with us. It was directed by William Sider, who also directed Room Service by the Marx Brothers. And you just see a lot of people being shared. You see a lot of actors being shared. So, people in this movie include Edgar Kennedy. We will be seeing again.
We'll see in Duck
we will
Soup.
be seeing
Yeah.
in Duck Soup. He's the peanut vendor.
And all
He's
through
in
the movie, I was just waiting for Edgar Kennedy because, of course, I'm a big Edgar Kennedy fan. Anyone who grew up in the 70s watching our gang comedies on syndicated television knows Edgar Kennedy because he was Kennedy the cop, and he was, this big, gruff Irishman with a bald head, and he made great comedy use of his bald head. And he was known for the slow burn. He was the guy who would get flustered and frustrated and angry, and he was always the heavy, and he was always known for slapping his forehead and running his hand down his face.
He was greatly abused in his whole career. That was what he was. He was the guy who was abused and would start getting very upset about it.
He was a master of it.
Yeah,
he was a brilliant comedy actor.
Another person, Louis Calhern. He is in, guess what? Duck Soup. He's in Duck Soup.
Playing pretty much the same character.
He's same exact character.
Yeah, this very elegant but corrupt sort of statesman that he's supposed to be. Yeah.
And he's overseeing the work of a beautiful woman who's infiltrating, who's kind of acting like a spy. Exact same role with the exact same dynamics between the other characters. The whole
and
thing.
I liked her.
Okay,
she's very funny.
So Marjorie White, the blondie. Marjorie White, I have something terrible to tell you. She died shortly after this.
Yeah, I knew. I think I looked that up.
This is one thing you learn doing podcasts, folks. People die. People die.
Well, as did Robert Woolsey died only a few years after, and that was the end of Wheeler and Woolsey.
Yeah. Let's talk about them too. But so Marjorie White, she died in 1935, not that long after, in a car accident. Very sad. She has so much spunk. I mean, she's so cute. It's ridiculous, right?
She is great, and the manner in which she's introduced in the movie is a bit troubling.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
She's basically dispensed out of a tube in a bag, like a instant dinner out of a microwave.
Wrapped in cellophane.
Not that I know what that is.
Yeah. And then Hugh Herbert, right? Who
oh yeah.
So Hugh Herbert, people would recognize him. Now, I remember him from Looney Tunes. They would do these celebrity impressions in Looney Tunes, and he was one of those celebrities so he was the whoo. Am I doing
really?
that right? That's him, yeah.
Him? Okay. I always assumed that was an extension of Ed Wynn. I guess there were a number of guys doing a kind of Ed Wynn-like thing. Just like there were a number of women doing kind of a Betty Boop thing, just like Marjorie White was, right? You know what I mean? Doing that baby voice. Like there were so many women doing that baby voice. So that was, I think it's similar. Hugh Herbert plays in a Chinese man. And not, he does his best with it.
What kept you?
It is written in the month of the snake. Rest today and make haste tomorrow.
Why?
Don't ask me. Did I write it?
It's really.
Well, he speaks in these kind of Confucianisms that are meant to be funny, and they're just dopey. And there's a whole gag of him like getting in a rowboat and rowing back to China, where his family is like he's got like 8,000 kids that he hates, and they were, where have you been? You're late for dinner, and
5 years late for dinner. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If you were wondering how many races get trodden on in this movie.
And we haven't even gotten to the finale. So,
yeah.
Yeah. So, but let me just also say Hugh Herbert's interesting because he was also a writer. He would write a lot of comedy. But one thing he participated in writing, which I just watched the other night, is The Great Gabbo, which is Eric von Stroheim, speaking of ventriloquists.
Sure, I know about that. I mostly know about that from The Simpsons. When
he contributed to the writing. He contributed to the writing of that. Now, I want somebody, please pay me to rewrite The Great Gabbo as a horror movie, because I know magic. You can't beat magic, but I would try. All right, so just Wheeler and Woolsey, just so people know. So they were circus performers, which you can kind of tell by the end of the movie. You go, oh, they must have been in the circus.
They do a little athletic, sort of an acrobat bit.
Yeah. This was something they would put into their movies. They played a couple clowns in something that ended up being remade into a movie, and they retained their roles in the movie version. And they were kind of breakout comedians in the movie. Like people really liked them in this movie. And they kind of broke out as a duo, as a comedic duo. And they made like 20 movies together.
They made a lot of movies in a really short time. And apparently
they were very successful.
They were as popular as the Marx Brothers. And having never seen them before, I watched them in this, and I'm mystified because I found them so unappealing.
Yeah.
I really just hated them. I really
don't
did not
hate
like them at all.
I don't hate them. I don't like them, but I don't hate them. Wheeler is the guy with the darker hair, the curly hair.
He's sort
Woolsey's-
of the childlike one.
And Woolsey has a feeling of George Burns about him. He has a little bit of a touch of George Burns, and he has these very circular glasses.
I had heard that Burns stole the glasses from him.
Really?
And
See,
the
there
sort
you
of
go. There
look.
you go.
Burns has stolen his look.
That's so funny because I was thinking that.
There's a resemblance there. Yeah, he definitely looks like George Burns.
And a cigar, and he always has a cigar.
He's playing what is ostensibly the Groucho character. He's the sort of the con artist one. He's the leader of the group. And he's the one who's got the schemes, and he's got the wisecracks, and
kind of more serious. Yeah. And he is a perfect cross between Groucho and George Burns in a way, if you want to think of it that way. Now, sadly, he had in an early-ish movie an accident where they were doing some stunt where he was like in the air on a rope, and the guy who was supposed to run the stunt was out sick that day. And sadly, the director was like, you stagehand, you handle the ropes or whatever. And of course, the stagehand didn't know what they were doing. It's something like this. And so something went wrong and he fell, and he never went to the doctor and really got it checked out. And it turned out he had kidney damage the rest of his life. And he was in a lot of pain for the rest of his life. Back then, people did not go to, people were like, I'm not going to the doctor. Even if you were internally bleeding for 20 years, you didn't go to the doctor. I know my grandparents were like that. They were absolutely like that. So he was one of those guys, and he ended up dying of his injuries not too long after. This was one of their later movies. The wife of Wheeler is Bernice Spear, who was in the Broadway version of Coconuts. All right, that's that.
Yeah, there's so much shared DNA between these movies and the Marx Brothers and these guys. It was all kind of, everybody was sort of in each other's business.
In the opening scene, you see the swastika, the headband, which was a Native American symbol. So it's always interesting to pick that up where nobody had any associations with that symbol.
Yeah, it's the swastika, but it's facing the other way. It's the backward swastika. Yeah. It's not facing the same way that the Nazi Party was using it at the time. Obviously, there was already Nazism in Germany. Hitler had just come to power, in fact, but it didn't have the impact on this side of the Atlantic that it did because, for the most part, most Americans didn't care what was going on in Germany at this point. Yeah. 1933.
Now, I was just sort of looking at what was happening worldwide, because it's interesting that these three movies came out all close to each other, and they all are themed about diplomacy and peace and crazy rulers, and that kind of thing. So you had Hitler coming to power. You had Stalin was already in power. He came in 27, I think, and Mussolini, so you had this stuff going on. So Tuck's Hip and $1 Million Legs are both about crazy rulers. That's kind of the thing that links them. Crazy rulers of little imaginary countries. This one, Diplomaniacs, is a little different. So I'm a little surprised people pair it all together. But really what happens in Diplomaniacs is this Native American tribe decide to infiltrate the Geneva Convention, which is,
I couldn't understand the plot at all.
Yeah, it's very, very, very confusing and very fantasy. They've heard that the Geneva Convention is actually like a war room, which it turns out it is.
It's unclear why they choose those two guys.
Yeah.
They're the worst possible choice.
I guess they feel like they need to send white guys, which makes sense in a way, right? Because they might not have accepted Native Americans to just show up at this thing, whereas white people can just kind of sneak in, like that. I guess. Kind of sense. All right. So these guys have a barbershop. It's completely unsuccessful. The Native Americans walk in and they demand for them to do this task for them, which is to go to Geneva and to broker peace. That's the basic plot of the story. Again, there's this opening number. Somehow
musical numbers I like.
Tell Geneva, wars of fever, and if it's red, and peace for all is our cry.
It was a little weird when they tossed them into the sky and they were floating in space. But yeah, okay. I don't know. They knew how to do this special effect and they wanted to use it.
I liked it because I was hoping they wouldn't come down.
Yes. And like you said, the costumes are kind of cute, and all the Indian dancing girls are adorable. Not to be sexist, but yeah, they're adorable.
Oh, I'm fine being sexist. I'm here in the 1930s. I can be sexist. And
and Wheeler and Woolsey were known for a little bit of a risque humor. They tried to get away with there's little risque jokes here and there.
There's some very risque jokes in it. Surprised me, even knowing it was a pre-code movie. I was surprised. There's this joke towards the end where they're saying,
the nations didn't want peace,
But we made them.
they didn't want to disarm.
But we made them.
The girls were a little bit tough at first,
But we... Come on, let's get out of here.
but it was all based on the idea that in the old days, when you'd say made it.
Made
that
it,
meant
yeah.
something that meant sex.
That's repeatedly used. That you made it means you made it. You mean you made it. It's not a great joke because it's so dumb to then bring up the girls when you're just, it doesn't make sense. But it's like,
well, it didn't
you
seem like they had much interest in the girls, and that was the thing
Yeah.
that sort of was weird to me about them. Is like, unlike the Marx Brothers, they didn't seem openly horny for any. Like, there's all these 1930s chorus girls running around and with the usual sort of lewd, eyebrow raising going on, but they didn't seem to care. They didn't seem incredibly horny in any way.
They're a little bit, they seem asexual. Now, I know somebody wrote some article about them being seemingly a little bit gay friendly because they do a lot of cross-dressing.
Right.
Now, I wouldn't say that because of the time, but who knows? I mean, I don't know. But some people do say they're a little bit, maybe gay friendly. Now, again, I think cross-dressing was common back then as a joke. But yeah, who knows? They do have an air about them that is kind of, asexual, but then maybe it's asexual because we're seeing them in juxtaposition with these women who are falling all over them. The two beautiful women, of course, fall in love with them.
Right.
And they don't seem
interested. They don't want to be part of it. They don't want to be part of it. They're running. Right. They're literally running away from these women.
Yes. And they seem very chummy. So, it's possible that they could, there is that little bit of that. Now, they were, like I said, they were both married to women. They were not gay, but, what the heck?
And even the stuff like outrageously funny cross-dressing, which every comedian was in, would have been forbidden after the code was enforced. So there's at least one or two gags in Diplomaniacs where Wheeler, not Woolsey, only Wheeler, is in drag and sort of wearing a nightgown or something like that, or he's actually wearing stockings. He's wearing like fishnet stockings.
Well, they both do drag. Yeah. And if you look at their other films, I looked at a little bit of their other films and they both do drag.
Well, there's a scene where they get to Paris and they do this like little song, which I kind of liked, where they sing about how beautiful Paris is and they're going to walk down the promenade. And the whole song is just the two of them. And Wheeler is sort of taking the female role in that and singing in this sort of high voice. And it does seem very much like a man and a woman singing together.
Yeah. And then at one point when they wake up in Paris, they're surrounded by chambermaids in skimpy costumes who at one point, all of them bend over at once and you really see their boobs. You're just like
pre-code cleavage. That is pre-code, man. That damn Hayes Code, and it ruined everything.
And again, they're just not they're just like
they don't seem they're not like
interested.
Your socks.
Merci.
Your shoes.
May we? And now we beg before the leg is placed into the trouser.
You mean you'd rather not be seen?
Yowzer.
But compare that to like Groucho and Harpo, never Chico. Weirdly, ironically, Chico in the movies is never pursuing chicks, but Harpo and Groucho both openly horny in those movies. Although in Duck Soup, I'd say Groucho is the least horny than he ever is because he's, he meets this Vera Marcal character and just disregards her completely, but in other movies, Groucho is, constantly horny, constantly chasing girls. And you believe it. You believe he's really horny for the girls. And in this movie at the end, when Woolsey makes that joke about the girls were tough, but we made them, it just comes off as jarring because you've seen no evidence up to that point that they had any interest in the girls at all.
And then there's this wonderful number between Wheeler and Marjorie White. It's such a cute song. And in the end, she's just this really very aggressive, feels slightly muscular in a way. She's like big shoulders for a little kid. And by the end of it, she's wrestling him to the ground. She's just being really aggressive.
Oh, sing it, bing. Each time thrown a popular tune. I put such feeling into it. I want to swoon. 1, 2, 3. That's the end. Give out rhythm and I'll give it. So sing.
And they're both fighting it out and they look like they're having so much fun. It's the cutest thing. Very nice little, like weird. It's kind of odd, but it's very cute, and warm musical number. They end up in Geneva. I did like the Dead Rat. I like that for the name of a bar. They hung out at this bar called the Dead Rat. And then we're introduced to Fifi. Phyllis Berry, who is absolutely gorgeous. She's interesting because she had one big hit movie. Everybody predicted she was going to be this huge star, and then she kind of disappeared. And sadly, she ended up dying of a drug overdose or possibly suicide. She's the dark one. She's got pitch black hair, raven black hair, and wears, black dresses. And when she kisses men, smoke, comes out of their
and
mouths.
they die. Apparently.
And they die. Yeah. It's
apparently.
like
and I like that gag. That was pretty funny.
And we will see in $1 Million Legs, there's a, and in Duck Soup, but especially $1 Million Legs,
there's a femme
an analog.
fatale.
Yeah, there's an analog in all three. Femme fatale like this, but really, really smoking, hot, dangerous femme fatale.
Yeah. I think my favorite of them is in $1 Million Legs.
Yeah. So I can't wait to talk about her, actually.
Lyda Roberti. I like her a lot.
Yeah. So in the end, they end up at the Geneva Convention, and as advertised by the Native Americans, everybody is trying to kill each other at the Geneva Convention. It's all these, white guys standing on tables, throwing paper and throwing punches.
And that's when we see Edgar Kennedy.
Yeah, he's kind of the president of the whole thing, with the gavel and trying to restore order.
And he's frustrated and he's upset, and chaos is all around him, and he's trying to maintain. He's doing some good Edgar Kennedying there. I'll say that.
Look, we should say they also make fun of the Swiss by dressing like little shepherds, basically like the kind of, classic. Yeah. So it's, again, in the context.
So this movie has not met an ethnic joke it didn't like.
Yeah. Again, just total caricature. And again, this is what they were doing on vaudeville. So, you don't just have the caricatures of the Chinese man, these are all white people. So of course it's less striking when they're dressed up as, in their little feathered hat and fancy overalls. What you would imagine a lonely goat herd to be wearing. It's not.
Well, I've only seen a lonely goat herd in one other movie, and you can guess what that is. Exactly. I'll give the movie this. As a political satire, it's a little more pointed than Duck Soup. Duck Soup, it's unclear what they're making fun of, other than the idea that all international diplomacy and all war is absurd. And in this one, they're being very much pointed. There is that joke where they go to the Geneva Convention and there's a sign that says, "Where the nations of the world fight over peace." It seems like it definitely has its point that it wants to make satirically, as far as the nature of politics and the nature of international diplomacy and the futility of it all. So I will give the movie that for having something to say. This is a lot more pointed as a satire, if you want to call it that.
And it's the Native Americans who spread the peace, right? So again, the times is very, very different back then. For all we know, the intention of the writers was to be very respectful to Native Americans, because in context,
by 1930 standards, they were.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, obviously, where we were just saying, well, you should be thanking us for decimating you because now you're civilized. You know what I mean? Like, so it's not that long. So in that context, it's possible that this was kind of progressive at the time as far as representing Native Americans. I'm not sure, absolutely sure about that, but that's my guess,
Another thing I'll give the movie is that it makes the point that the Lewis Calhern, his character is a manufacturer of weapons, and he's in cahoots with this cadre of big businessmen with funny names who are all manufacturing munitions. So they don't want the peace conference to succeed. They want war to be going on everywhere for their own business interests. And I want to get back to that when we mentioned Duck Soup, because Duck Soup does not have any kind of a point of that kind to make. And at that point, I was sort of impressed. You can definitely call this a satire.
And ding, 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 yeah. Bedazzled made the same point. They had a munitions dealer.
Right. I mean, it's not a new. It's not a.
And of course, Strangelove. We can tie Strangelove into all of this in different ways. Strangelove can be tied to this movie in some ways, and it can also be tied to Duck Soup in some ways. It's just sort of fun to make these associations. I also want to bring The Great Dictator into all of this. Eventually, we can sort of attach ourselves to that in the next movie, because this one, there's no crazy dictator.
I want to bring up two things that this has in common with Duck Soup, two specific little references. One is both this and Duck Soup reference the song from 1932, Fit as a Fiddle and Ready for Love. In this movie and in Duck Soup, one of the characters says, "Hey, na nani and a hot cha-cha." Mm-hmm. And that is from the song Fit as a Fiddle and Ready for Love.
With a hey, na nani and a hot cha-cha.
And the other thing that it references is All God's Chillin'.
Yeah.
They got drums, we got drums, all God's children got drums. We're gonna walk all over the hell, all God's children got drums.
Which is
that was obvious, yeah.
What they called a spiritual. It was a traditional spiritual. And this is probably a good time to mention, oh God, oh man, oh God, oh God.
Let me talk about how it ends. So all of these movies have the speech, kind of that is the centerpiece, which, the great dictator had a speech, and Dr. Strangelove had a speech, and, and what they do is they do a circus act where they're doing this acrobatic thing while discussing why there should be peace.
Can my distinguished opponent deny? The forgotten man, he wants peace.
Hey, nummy, nummy, and a hot cha-cha. This a big success in Europe.
My mother and your mother, they both want peace.
And it's very bizarre.
In the close-ups, it's them. In the long shots, it isn't.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting.
If you look closely, you can tell. Yeah.
So someone throws a bomb into the entire hall, the Geneva Convention. The entire convention gets blown up. The unfortunate byproduct of that, the ash made everyone black. And here we begin a blackface finale. So So again, it's very striking because it's very Duck Soup in that they do the exact same song. There's a reference to the exact same song. All God's Chillin'. I forget how it goes, but it's a tradition. It goes back to the 19th century. Yeah. And so that's, again, and so it's a real, this is a hardcore blackface more than you see even usually. People are absolutely pitch black, and they really have this huge whiteness around their mouth. We're talking a lot of people. It's like everybody at the convention, and then the audience
basic watching minstrel show. It's a minstrel show.
Now, how they perform it is not disrespectful to Black culture, except for how they look. Like how they look is very disturbing.
It's like saying it's not disrespectful, except that it's a minstrel show. It's like, when I was watching it, I was a man in 2021 watching it. So,
no, I know. So I'm not excusing this. I'm just saying that they're doing the songs respectfully, but it's horrifying to look at, because the look is so cartoon,
but it's not
very cartoon.
I mean, it's not the worst minstrel show. It's like saying the good kind of brain cancer.
No, I'm not saying it's the good kind of anything. I'm not saying there is a scale, but in any case,
but I know what you mean.
Scale is the intent. Did they mean to be really offensive? Did they mean to make fun of Black culture? I'm also talking about that with the Native American culture. So that's all I'm saying. But yeah, it's horrifying. Again, I actually feel. I, told our audience to watch this before I realized that was in it. So I would have given a warning or something, had I known.
I wish somebody had warned me.
Yeah.
I was so unhappy. I was looking up the song, though, the All God's Chillin', which is here and because it's here and it's in Duck Soup as well. And I found a recording of Paul Robeson doing it.
Yeah.
And I thought about Paul Robeson, who, was very, very popular in the 1920s, and he very famous, and I just thought of like that this exists at the same time as Paul Robeson on stage doing serious dramas, and I thought, gee whiz, what a strange world it was.
Yeah. And you'll see other films where there are Black people incorporated. Obviously, all of those things were going on at once. You know what I mean? Like there was a lot of different takes on this all at once.
You can argue that the Marx Brothers didn't go in for ethnic humor unless you count one of the members of the Marx Brothers was one long ethnic joke. Okay, before we go on to $1 Million Legs, they mentioned dandruff. I didn't know that. I didn't know that in 1933 that was a problem.
That's so funny because I started watching a different Woolley and Woolsey. I can't even remember their names.
Woolsey and Will. I don't know. It's hard. It's hard. After the minstrel show, I kind of just there's no coming back from that. It's kind of, I couldn't recover from it.
Well, so all right. So let me throw this in. So I watched This Is Africa, or I watched the second half of it where they go to Africa. Guess what? They go to Africa. Yes, they do.
Gee.
Yes, they do. Now, what's interesting there is they use all white people for Africans, but they don't even pretend that they're African. They basically call them all Tarzans and Janes. So it's like this tribe. Yeah, it's a tribe, but it's a tribe of Tarzans and Janes, and it's all white people, but they're not really pretending it's Africans. You know what I mean? So it's really, they kind of skirt around the whole issue. They also bring up dandruff in that. That's why it freaked me out that you mentioned that, because I just saw them mention dandruff in that. They align with dandruff.
He's got dandruff too.
And the reason I mention it now is because it gets mentioned in $1 Million Legs as well. So, and I always just assumed that the Head and Shoulders company kind of invented dandruff in the 1960s to sell their snake oil, because
I've seen
honestly, it doesn't work. It doesn't do anything. And if anything, Head and Shoulders gives you dandruff.
Does it?
I am
don't know.
uncovering that. I'm going to uncover that conspiracy theory in my lifetime and bring the whole thing crumbling down. So I was shocked that in the 1930s, people knew about dandruff.
So $1 Million Legs.
$1 Million Legs.
It
A
came
delight
out.
from start to finish.
Oh, yeah. It's July 8th, 1932. This came out before
Right.
Diplomaniacs. This is a W.C. Fields movie above all else. Again,
I was surprised by how little he's in it, actually.
yeah, he's not, and some people put Jack Oakey as the top billing sometimes. So that makes sense because he kind of is. Let's just again revisit Joseph Mankiewicz. He wrote All About Eve.
I've never actually seen it.
My weird hot take is I don't like All About Eve, and I think it's disappointing that won so many Oscars. All right, so that's sorry. He also directed and wrote Guys and Dolls, Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor. Edward Klein is the director. He did all the biggest W.C. Fields movies. He also did a lot of Buster Keaton. He apparently was kind of a jerk. People did not like working with him, and some describe him as a very uncreative guy, actually. They say he had very little imagination, and he was very, very, very literal. And I think that's sort of interesting to think about. If you haven't watched this movie, think about it while you're watching it, because you sort of realize that maybe that's why it's a little bit of an odd movie. It was produced again by Herman, his brother, the big shot Herman Mankiewicz, and also B.P. Schellberg, who was also a big shot producer. So W.C. Fields at one point is doing these really cool exercises with juggling pins. And I thought, was he a juggler? And so I actually did not know that W.C. Fields started his career as one of the greatest jugglers of all time.
I think I did know that on some level.
That's where he started. Yeah,
he was also a circus guy. Yeah,
and there's some YouTube footage of him juggling, and it is it's pretty cool stuff. That's where he got his start.
Well, let's just get this right out of the way. I love this movie. I've seen it a couple of times. It's a delight from start to finish. Everybody in it is delightful. Everybody in it is funny. Everything about it is funny. It's just goofy and silly and ridiculous, and it moves along, and it never gets boring. And some of the gags are really imaginative and cartoonish and absurd, and I adore it.
It's a little bit bizarre. It
sure is.
It has some really interesting screenshots. If you pull from really interesting stills from this movie. Now, again, as far as this director not having sense of humor, some person was quoted as saying that he didn't really understand this movie as he was directing it. So again, it's just interesting.
I could see that.
Yeah,
you don't need to understand it.
Yeah, it's a very nonsensical. Really, it's like Duck Soup, and it's like all of these movies. It's like all three of these movies where there's a lot of nonsensical. What the fuck? What does this have to do with this? In Diplomaniacs, the Native Americans are sending messages to these guys via arrows. Somehow, mysteriously through the ether, they're ending up in Switzerland. They're arrows with messages on them. You don't know how. You're not supposed to understand how. It's some kind of magic. Who knows?
The difference is I'm on this movie's side. I'm on $1 Million Legs. I'm on its side.
Yeah.
With Diplomaniacs, I just found I couldn't get into Wheeler and Woolsey. I just found them unlikable.
You can see the contrast. How sophisticated the Marx Brothers were when you compare.
Am I just used to the Marx Brothers? Is that it?
No, you can see the sophistication. There's a world of difference, Okay, Jack Oakey, he was a superstar in his time. He's adorable in this.
Yeah, very fun.
And he ended up, and I want to start talking about The Great Dictator, which was the famous Charlie Chaplin movie about Hitler. He played Mussolini, basically. He was the Mussolini ripoff in that movie. So that's kind of interesting. Billy Gilbert. We saw him in our puppet countdown working for our Andy's gang, friggin' Andy Devine, the horrifying Andy Devine. Billy Gilbert was he had these unbelievably talented character actors working with Froggy the Gremlin, right? Who can figure
I didn't find Andy Devine nightmarish, but Froggy the Gremlin, totally.
So Billy Gilbert, it was this amazing character actor who was known for his sneeze. Like, of course, he started on vaudeville, and he was famous for doing these sneeze jokes. So that's why, almost bizarrely in this movie, you see him doing the sneeze gag, and you're like, wait, what? Like, why is he doing that? It's because that was his trademark. That was his trademark. Billy Gilbert was also in The Great Dictator.
You also have, ironically, this movie called $1 Million Legs, which you have Smilin' Ben Turpin is in it.
Yes.
the man whose eyes were insured for $1 million
Yes, yes.
in case they ever uncrossed.
In case they were across. Right. So Susan Fleming had her legs insured as a publicity stunt for this movie. This was kind of common back then, was people would do these little weird publicity stunts like that. I guess they still do. And so yeah, he was the first. He was the first to pull that publicity stunt, which was for his eyes. He came from silent movies.
Well, he
So
plays
to
a
me,
spy.
Yeah, he plays a spy.
And he's dressed
around.
in like spy versus spy outfit. He's
Right.
got that like the wide brimmed hat with the cloak, and he's all black. It's like this old timey version of a spy.
Yeah, and so he doesn't really say anything through it's same silent role, which is what he did. This was late in his career. He had retired when talkies came in. He decided he didn't want to do talkies. He just loved silent movies, and he was, he did some really good real estate investing, LA real estate investing. Good for him. And he didn't need to work. He was making dough off of his properties. So anyway.
Well, they didn't call him Smiling Ben Turpin for nothing.
Yeah. So this was kind of a treat for people to see him because he wasn't doing a lot of movies at that time. Lyda Roberti. Oh my gosh. So she's just the sweetest, cutest thing in the whole world.
Follow me. Not too close or you catch on fire.
She was born in Warsaw. She's half Russian, half Polish. She was from a circus family, made it to America, got on a role in Broadway, and was like an overnight sensation. People just adored her immediately. She had this really cute, crazy accent. She had spent part of her childhood in Russia, part of it in Shanghai, China. Her family's like, when the Russian Revolution was happening, they were like, we're out of here, which was smart. They went to Shanghai. So she actually grew up part of her childhood in Shanghai. And then, of course, spent time in Europe and just had this crazy kind of hybrid accent that people really loved. It was a little hard.
And I couldn't tell in this movie if she's exaggerating her accent or trying to do an accent, or if she's meant to evoke like Marlene Dietrich, I think, a little bit, or I don't know if that was her real accent or not, but it's a very exaggerated kind of Eastern European sounding accent.
Yeah, well, she legitimately grew up in Russia and China. And then she did see that people delighted in it. People thought it was adorable. Like when she was on Broadway, there were certain words she'd say and everybody would crack up because she was, you can imagine it's the dumb blonde thing. And it's like, she'll say some word completely incorrect because she's a dumb foreigner blonde. And everybody thought that was really funny. So she played that up for sure.
It's sorry when I get home. I'm just a person that forget me not. I'm not so mighty like I look so what when I get home.
She's really fun in this movie, and she plays the femme fatale who is hired, in order to basically seduce certain key male characters in order to pull off a scheme, which is a character that's sort of a thing that occurs in all three of these movies.
Right. She's directly a reference to Mata Hari, so that was already in the news.
Yeah, she's called Mata McCree in this movie.
Yeah,
and she reminds me a lot of, if you ever saw Mel Brooks' Silent Movie, she's the Bernadette Peters character in Silent Movie. And I think there's a lot of, while I was watching this, I was thinking of Silent Movie. And I think Mel Brooks must have been a big fan of this movie because some of the visual gags, they sort of hit that same note of kind of visual surrealism and absurdity.
I love on her sign, it says, not responsible for men left over 30 days. I thought that was really cute.
That's a great gag.
That's a great gag, yeah.
And there's a couple of recurrences of a really risque joke where somebody says, well, why don't we do this? And the woman says, in public?
You know what?
What?
I love you.
In Klopstock here, there's another way of saying that.
In public?
Yeah, I noticed that. They do that like
that comes up a couple of times that, and it's such an obvious dirty joke, it's again, pre-code.
When Thelma Todd died, when she had film roles and she was scheduled for, and then she sadly died so young, Lyda Roberti was hired to replace her. She was often Thelma Todd's replacement for the next few movies that Thelma Todd was scheduled to do. She was also very good friends with Patsy Kelly, who of course is very good friends with Thelma Todd. And sadly, Lyda Roberti died at 31 of a heart attack. She had a heart problem her whole life, probably from her father being very rough with her in the circus, they say. But she just up and died. She was tying her shoelaces and she just dropped dead. It's so sad.
I love her in this movie because she's so like sexy but not sexy at all.
Yeah.
She's doing this sexy thing, but it's just goofy, and the idea that she does this sort of weird gyrating dance in order to motivate men to lift weights is just baffling and weird. And the more she exaggerates the dance, the less sexy it becomes, and the more just odd and weird it becomes.
It's like Gwen Verdon.
So this movie, I gotta say, it's a lot of fun. It's like Duck Soup. It takes place in a fictional country, which is called Klopstokia. And you don't learn too much about this country, but what you do learn is bizarre. The first thing you learn is that the president of the country, it's a poor country, they have no money. The president of the country is W.C. Fields, and he has superhero strength for some reason. He is able to lift incredible amounts of weight, and he has like mutant superhero strength. And then you find out later, it's basically an entire country of super athletes.
They imply that it's the goat's milk. They imply that it's the goat's milk.
Oh, there's a lot of goats in this movie. There's so much going on with the goats. There's goats everywhere. And there's a point at which somebody puts on a nightmarish goat costume,
yes,
which I enjoyed. And I love there's a gag where we find out that every woman in the country is named Angela, and every man in the country is named George.
Yes.
And there's a great gag where the Jack Oakey character is trying to find this girl he just met, and he only knows that her name is Angela.
Oh, Angela! What?
And one of the goats even turns around.
I love it. That's great. It's a great joke. Yeah.
Yes.
Joke.
And so the plot of this thing, it makes zero sense. The country is poor. They don't have any money. And there's some reason they need a lot of money for some reason. I forget why.
They need $8 million.
Right. They need $8 million.
So his cabinet wants to overthrow him.
That's right. Right.
Because he's been handling the money poorly.
Right. He has this treacherous cabinet that wants to overthrow him. So Jack Oakey falls in love with the president's daughter. And of course, he's opposed to that. He prides himself on having driven away every suitor she's ever had.
Yeah.
And so, but he likes this suitor because this suitor comes up with the idea, oh, why don't you enter the Olympics and you can win $8 million?
Yeah.
Since there are all these super athletes around and you can lift weights and everything. So that's what they decide to do.
It happens to be the Los Angeles Olympics.
It's the Los Angeles 1932 Olympics, which was real. So then they've got to gather up all the men who can do things and do athletic things, like they find the fastest runner and the guy who can jump the most. And then they all have to get on a ship and go and travel to the United States to enter the Olympics. And I want to point out, they get to the United States, they get to the Olympics, and the countries of the world are there. And even then, there's not one single ethnic joke in the whole goddamn movie.
Yeah.
Not one. Not even when you see all the countries come into the Olympics. Not one. It all takes place in a fictional country. They're a fictional nationality. There's not one ethnic joke in the whole damn movie.
There's also nobody who is not white. There's nobody.
All right, there's that. But the point is, my point still stands. It's refreshing. It's refreshing for a movie from 1932 to have zero ethnic humor.
Yeah.
Because it's such an absurd cartoon from start to finish.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a crazy movie. And I like that they keep these weird Klopstockian, they're so stupid, these traditions and these absurdities. Again,
Klopstockian love song.
The love song, as I was about to bring up, is the Klopstockian love song, one of my favorite gags in the movie. And at first I thought, well, this is so dumb. She has this Klopstockian love song that's been passed along through the family that she wants him to sing to her to prove his love to her. It's so stupid.
And it's gibberish. It's just gibberish.
It's just gibberish. Words. It's like the Oompa. It's like there was always people were into gibberish words also, I think, in the 30s and 20s. The boop boop a doop crap. They loved all that stuff. But what's so funny is she has it on. It looks like a goat skin.
Here is a song of love. It's in the old Klopstockian language that we used to speak before we learned English. It's an old family copy.
Say, tell me, what's it printed on?
My grandfather.
That's a great one. That's a great one.
Yeah. And that's when we find out that the leading lady is a super diver because
Yeah.
he throws it over a bridge and she has to go get it, and that basically sets up that she's going to win diving in the Olympics.
Yeah.
And
of course,
it's a silly plot. Who the hell cares?
The Madik Hari, character comes along in the book, and her thing is she's supposed to sabotage their winning the Olympics by seducing all the men in the Olympic team.
How dirty is that? The whole idea is that she's going to seduce the entire team. The
entire
whole
team.
team. That's her job.
Well, she does tell them she loves them. She tells them all that she loves them, and they're driven to distraction just by the idea that she loves them. They keep it innocent. They don't really even imply that she's sleeping with them, but they're just so like, oh, she's in love with me, that kind of thing. And they're all under her spell. She puts people under her spell.
The president's major domo, who's the fastest runner in the country, he outruns a train. Because once they get to the United States, they have to take a train across country from New York to get to Los Angeles. And he's running alongside the train. And it looks just like the scene in Superman when young Clark Kent is running beside the train. I think they might have did it the same way, just by under cranking the camera and making it look like he's running faster than the train. I don't know, but it looks exactly like the scene from Superman.
The major domo is Andy Clyde, and he ended up in Lassie. Like, I kind of recognize him from Lassie, from the black and white Lassie.
The leading lady, Susan Fleming, who, as we mentioned, went on to become the future wife of Harpo Marx and lived to be to 94, died in 2002. God bless her. She and the Mata Hari character have a fight, and they have this sort of cat fight. And at some point, Susan Fleming calls Lyda Roberti,
"You blondine, overstuffed cooch dancer."
I felt that even for a pre-code movie, that was a bit much, and so I felt I needed to look that up. So it turns out cooch was a dance performed by women that was once common in carnivals and fairs, and marked by sinuous and often suggestive twisting and shaking of the torso and limbs. So it was just a way of saying you're a girl who does a sexy dance at the circus.
The kind of dance that Lyda was doing for these guys to
pretty much what she was doing,
but
to say you do it at the circus was kind of insulting, I guess.
Right.
But so it was cooch dancer. I'm just going to leave it. I'm just going to say cooch dancer. Can I say it one more time? Cooch dancer.
Lyda also worked in the circus. All these people did come from the circus.
Well, cooch dancer is not the only great vernacular in this. There's also a point where somebody says to W.C. Fields, calls him, "You big mallet head," and then says, "You're a big beetle puss slug." And oh my God, why can't we have language poetry like that nowadays? Yeah, big beetle puss slug. In fact, I actually right now look like exactly right to say it. So I'm going to go ahead and say that again, just because I'm dressed for it. Why, you big beetle puss slug.
The thing with this movie is there's no message. I mean, there's no message.
Not at all. No.
This is just
the opposite
of
pointed satire. It's just silly.
Well, of course, there's no war, really. It's just spies, and sabotage and, the possible overthrowing of this dictator, I guess. There's no question that nobody was trying to make any statement about anything at all. Okay, duck soup, you guys, duck soup. All right, so we're finally getting to duck soup.
Finally. It's been building up to this. And
let me just say, written by Kalmar and Ruby, the people who wrote the music for Diplomaniacs and who wrote so much music for Marx Brothers. They also wrote the entire screenplay, although they got a lot of help from Arthur Sheikman and Nat Perrin. A lot of this dialogue came from Flywheel, Shyster and Flywheel, which was the radio program that Groucho and Chico were doing. So it's a collaborative script. Leo McCarey was the director. He had done a ton of the old stuff, Hal Roach Studios, Our Gang, and all that stuff. Laurel and Hardy. He was the guy who created Laurel and Hardy. He booked them together. He put them together in a film. He said, "Let's put Laurel with Hardy." That was the guy. And
that was good. I'm glad he didn't pair Laurel with Woolsey.
Yes,
because that would have sucked.
By the way, interestingly too, he was an assistant director to Todd Browning.
Wow.
And he wanted to be an actor. And Browning was like, "No, you need to direct. You're very good at this." So that's interesting. And so anyway,
that is interesting. He also he directed the movie Ruggles of Red Gap, which is a classic.
He did a ton of early comedy, but then he's also a very religious Catholic, and he got into very serious stuff. So he did The Bells of St. Mary's. He did.
Oh boy.
Yeah, he
Oh
did.
God, I hate Bing Crosby so much.
He did The Awful Truth with Irene Dunn and Cary Grant. He did The Bells of St. Mary's, An Affair to Remember, and Make Way for Tomorrow, which I only saw recently. And that's a really interesting movie about elderly people being put out to pasture. You know, this movie was banned by Mussolini. It doesn't seem that potently political to us now, but Mussolini did recognize himself in this and did ban it. So
Yeah,
that's
although
kind of interesting.
in fairness, Mussolini, he just because he thought it was too similar to Diplomaniacs.
Yes, it's like, how dare you? How
Yeah,
dare
he was
you?
a big Diplomaniacs fan, and he just thought it was a
Unsurprisingly.
ripoff. Yeah.
Unsurprisingly. So
That
Duck
is, I've seen it all before.
And so Duck Soup, of course, again, it has some of the same people, but Margaret Dumont is here with us once again. We have a couple people who also ended up in Wooly and Woolsey, Weasley and Wooly, Wheeler and Woolsey,
Well,
whatever.
Lewis Calhoun plays Ambassador Trentino of Sylvania.
But also the women in this movie. So Raquel Torres, she was in So This Is Africa, playing the sort of Jane character.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And then in Day at the Races, the blonde in that movie is also in So This Is Africa. Esther Muir.
We assume a lot of people watching this have seen Duck Soup and or already know a lot about Duck Soup or have seen it at least once. So you get the sort of the gist of it, which is this Groucho is appointed leader of this fictional country at the behest of Margaret Dumont, who is going to loan the country money. Again, the country is broke, just like in $1 Million Legs. Yeah. She, for some reason, inexplicably, likes Groucho's character.
She's got a crush on him.
Insists that he should be the president. And this is kind of the central conceit of all the Marx Brothers films, is that Margaret Dumont is either crazy or is a masochist or whatever, but seems to be fine with Groucho Marx, even though he's always horrible to her. And she just
he calls
says,
her fat twice.
Your Excellency.
He makes two fat jokes.
He makes a number of fat jokes.
And she's so gorgeous.
I've sponsored your appointment because I feel you are the most able statesman in all Fredonia.
Well, that covers a lot of ground. Say, you cover a lot of ground yourself. You better beat it. I hear they're going to tear you down and put up an office building where you're standing.
And she's delighted by it. She's charmed constantly. But I think
she's
that's
kind of thrown, and then she just comes right back.
Yeah.
She's like, how dare you? And then she comes right back. You know?
But for me, that's like the sort of the central point of the Marx Brothers is, and I've made this point many times, it's that they are inexplicable. The only way the movie can go on is if she keeps inviting them back to her parties, if she keeps, throwing big galas for them, if she just goes on as if nothing is wrong.
Retains her crush.
Yeah, as if
on Groucho.
Will you marry me? Did he leave you any money? Answer the second question first.
He left me his entire fortune.
Is that so? Can't you see what I'm trying to tell you? I love you.
Oh, Your Excellency.
You're not so bad yourself.
Groucho has some interesting parts in this. I do like when somebody says to him, and now I'd like to introduce you to a charming woman. And he says, well, it's about time. And he runs off. And they introduce him to the Raquel Torres character. And because she's been hired to be, seductive with him, she says to him, oh, maybe we can dance together sometime.
Perhaps sometime we get a chance to dance together, huh?
I could dance with you till the cows come home.
Yeah.
On second thought, I'd rather dance with the cows till you come home.
Huh.
Groucho is always being kind of lecherous with girls, but when one is being aggressive with him, it makes sense that he would just run the other way from that. He would just not be interested.
Interest, yeah.
Well, it's not that he would lose interest. It would just be like, you can't pull on me what I pull on you. You don't get to do that to me.
Yeah.
You're not the one who gets to be lewd. It almost seems like that. It almost seems like no, I'm the one who does that, not you. Yeah. And I'm not interested if you're going to do that. I'm going to do that to some other girl, which he does. I mean, he does a little bit of that. I love when he's doing his musical number and he's waving his arms around, but they just kind of fall around a girl.
Yeah,
just like that. And it's lecherous, but it's also quite sweet and charming.
Yeah, that's a very charming bit. I like that bit. Harpo's not as sexual in this movie. They really don't have him doing any of that. He's actually much more childlike. He's much more childlike and impish, and they're both, he and Chico are quite You know,
Well,
they're
there's
quite mean to, I think that I actually, it's so funny. As I get older, I find that peanut vendor scene, I guess, you see it so many times and
yeah.
it becomes a cliche and you get a little sick of it because I've seen it so many times. But I do feel like I find it a little more disturbing the more I watch it. Like it's so mean. It's so mean what they do to this guy.
But it's
I don't
Edgar
know.
Kennedy, and he comes off as just a natural born bully. Let me give you some context. Let me give you this context.
See, I almost wish they had shown him as a little bit more of a bully, so you had more feeling of why they would do that to him. Because I do feel like he doesn't really come off as a bully. That they are just picking on him because he's next to them,
Well,
and
personally, I don't need the Marx Brothers to have motivation. I think it's better when they have no motivation whatsoever. When they're
so much meanness,
when their devotion is not to any cause of justice or anything like that. It's to simply creating mayhem for the sake of mayhem.
They're wrecking his business. They're wrecking his business.
Isn't that? Yeah, and it's funny. It's hilarious. You're right. They're wrecking his business. But let me put this into a little bit of context for you. We know from talking about the Marx Brothers' real history on the and especially Harpo's real history, young Adolf. He and his brother Leonard and Chico were little, very short, small Jewish boys growing up in New York, and they were often terrorized by bigger Irish boys. So this may have been somewhat cathartic because there's no more Irish-looking guy than Edgar Kennedy. I wanted to mention the scene with Chico and Harpo, which, by the way, they play spies named Ciccolini and Pinky. They're in Trentino's office, and Trentino's secretary comes in. And there is that one moment where Harpo catches sight of this beautiful blonde and just locks onto her and locks eyes with her and starts moving towards her, and in a kind of scary, and she's just like, what the fuck? Chico pulls him back and says, as if to sort of say, not now. And that's the only sort of moment where we get Harpo doing the thing of like just literally chasing women. The bit with the sidecar and the motorcycle, I laugh every single time. It just gets better and better every single time.
And again, it's Harpo's deadpanness on that too. He's just got that innocent look, just the way he misdirects with his face. That every time it works because every time he kind of misdirects with his face as if he's going to drive him.
And I love how nobody gets the better of Groucho except Harpo. It's like rock, paper, scissors. It literally is that between the three of them, there's a hierarchy there. And in this movie, something we didn't bring up in Animal Crackers, because it definitely occurs in Animal Crackers, and it occurs in this movie a couple of times, is Harpo seems to be the only one who has access to magic.
Mm-hmm.
Harpo seems to, because he is a mute idiot or something, seems to be connected to the other plane of existence and can do magic. So he can do the thing with the sidecar effortlessly. He can produce things out of his coat that there's no way they could possibly be in there, like a live seal. He can somehow have a tattoo. We don't see it, but we're told it's there, of Groucho's grandfather somewhere on his body.
I love that joke. I love
somewhere
that
on
joke.
The whole bit with the tattoo. And of course he has...
Clearly on his butt. Clearly it's on his butt.
Probably on his butt. But then he has a tattoo on his chest of a doghouse, and an actual dog pokes its head out.
That's so freaky.
Yeah. Okay, pre-code alert. This movie has maybe the dirtiest joke in all three of the movies we've seen. It has a scene implying that a man and a horse and a woman had a threesome.
That's right. I love that. Although it's Harpo, if you've watched these movies, he loves horses, and he always has a sweetheart, almost a sweetheart horse. It almost is his.
But that's just it. In Animal Crackers, he shows a picture of a horse as his girlfriend.
Right.
And in this, there's a scene in bed, and there's three pairs of shoes: a man's shoes, a woman's shoes, and horseshoes. Now, then they cut to the long shot, and you do see that they're in separate beds, but the separate bed is for the woman. Harpo and the horse are in bed together.
I believe they were making a statement about the code, because the code was you couldn't show a man and a woman in the same
that's
bed.
Interesting.
They were just riffing to just on that specific movie rule. It was a meta joke,
But if you just see the shoes at the foot of the bed, it's an immensely dirty joke. course, we didn't mention the mirror scene,
Yeah,
which is one of the most famous things. One thing I find I love about the mirror scene when I rewatched it recently is that it plays in complete silence. There's no music. There's no anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like a holdover from the silent era when you could have a movie play out in complete silence.
Yeah. They were thrilled to get McCary because he does come from that. He was a specialist in that kind of old-timey comedy. So he was perfect. This was originally supposed to be directed by Lubitsch. Did you know that?
Oh, no.
Yeah, he was supposed to do
Wow.
it, and somehow that didn't work out. But this was a really good director for this.
That very first scene where you see Zeppo in this movie, and we should mention Zeppo is in this movie.
He is.
It's easy
What's
to
the
forget.
bit he does, Joe?
It's
What's
easy
the
to
bit he
forget.
does?
Well, he gets to sing at the beginning, and I love it when
It's
Zeppo
like two
sings.
lines, like two lines.
He sings at the beginning and at the end.
I'm gonna put that clip in of Zeppo's entire.
He sings when the clock on the wall strikes
his
10.
entire performance in this movie.
His Excellency makes it a point always to be on time. As long as I've known him, he's never been late for an appointment.
His Excellency is due to take his station, beginning his new administration. He'll make his appearance when the clock on the wall strikes 10.
And then he sings at the end. I do like when Zeppo sings. He gets to be in the movie.
He gets to be in the movie. Thanks, Mom.
All right. To me, as I've said many times,
I know.
it's not the Marx Brothers.
I'm just
without
busting
Zeppo.
on,
Even
I'm
if he
just
doesn't
busting on you.
even if he doesn't do anything, even if he is simply ballast, his presence changes what they are to me. And that is important. It's not the same without.
You're the only one.
Zeppo.
Yes,
and
okay.
I don't think I am the only one who thinks that. In Diplomaniacs, I mentioned that there's this plot line that the Lewis Calhoun character has this group of munitions manufacturers that are trying to make sure that there is no peace and there is no war. What I found out is in one of the early drafts of the script for Duck Soup, that was the plot of Duck Soup. Groucho was an arms dealer who was leading the country into war so that he could maintain his fortune as an arms dealer. And boy, that sure isn't the Marx Brothers.
Yeah, yeah.
Because again, as I've mentioned many times, when you try to explain their behavior in some way, it doesn't make any sense.
It's kind of weird to try to make a statement with a Marx Brothers movie. Like, It would have been very bizarre. It's interesting. I knew that they had an earlier script. A lot of the names were changed. A lot of the roles were different. It was Firecracker.
Pinky was Brownie.
Pinky was Brownie. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I knew there was an earlier script, but yeah, it just would be strange to make a statement. You know, they already the amount of statement that they're making is adequate to the Marx Brothers. So they're definitely making a statement that war is absurd. I mean, they're definitely making the statement
which is enough. Yeah, a dictator. It's a broad statement.
It's a crazy dictator who can get away with anything. They're holding a war for absolutely no reason. The war is just over misunderstanding.
Could have been easily avoided. No, not even misunderstanding. It could have been easily avoided.
If he had just not slapped this idiot, the other, Groucho slaps the guy and that's it.
Him and Trentino reconcile it, and then Groucho basically makes him say it again, makes him say the insult again, and says, "Oh, I can't recall. No, it was a 7-letter word you said to me."
Little thing I called you. Why, what did I call you?
Gosh, I don't even remember what it was.
Well, do you mean worm?
No, that wasn't it.
I know. Swine.
No, it was a 7-letter word.
Oh, yes. Upstart.
That's it. Upstart.
Oh, hey.
Basically goads him into saying it again so that he can bring the country back to the brink of war.
Yeah.
For, again, totally unmotivated.
I'd be unworthy of the high trust that's been placed in me if I didn't do everything within my power to keep our beloved Fredonia at peace with the world. I'd be only too happy to meet Ambassador Trentino and offer him on behalf of my country the right hand of good fellowship. And I feel sure that he will accept this gesture in the spirit in which it is offered. But suppose he doesn't. Think of it. I hold out my hand, and that hyena refuses to accept it. Why, the cheap, ball-flushing swine, he'll never get away with it, I tell you. He'll never get away with it. So, you refuse to shake hands with me, eh?
The lesson is more from the perspective of the dictator. The statement isn't strong because you really have Firefly promoting this war. He's almost the hero of the movie, and he's promoting this war. And the war is so entertaining, right? And he's changing costumes to the whole thing.
Every scene, every shot of them during the war finale, they're in a different military uniform.
It's almost, you can almost argue it's a celebration of war. You can almost argue it's a celebration of war instead of a criticism of it. But, you know, ultimately it is chaotic.
Well, there's a musical number announcing that they're going to war.
Yes.
Fredonia's gone to war. Each native son will grab a gun and run away to war. At last we're going to keep freedom on the streets of war. We're going to war. At last our country's gone to war.
With banjos and singing, it's a delight.
So I don't know, maybe it is a celebration of war. It's sort of interesting to think. I didn't think about that until it came out of my mouth.
It can't be, because it is presented as being so utterly absurd.
I think that the message, it's kind of like Strangelove, where it's all a game. It's showing that war is a silly men's game, right? You know, that's kind of, you know, like in Strangelove, they compare it to sex. Right. It's about sex and seminal fluids and hoarding women underground. And it's really a dick waving, you know, kind of thing.
And it ends on a great note. I love that it ends on this pretty anticlimactic note, is that Ambassador Trentino, who surrenders to them, and they start throwing vegetables at him. And Margaret Dumont is behind them and is so happy and delighted with this triumph that she begins spontaneously singing. And so they turn around and start throwing vegetables at her. Yeah. Fight the real enemy, as Sinead O'Connor used to say.
I surrender! I surrender! I'm sorry, you'll have to wait till the food runs out.
Victory is ours! Hail, hail, Fredonia!
I love that ending.
I love the ending.
They're being horrible to Margaret Dumont, but that's where they started. So it comes right back around to where they started.
But also, it's just a very visually satisfying ending, and it's genuinely very funny. There's something she executes it perfectly. She's got that beautiful operatic voice that's a little on the edge of annoying. It's a beautifully executed ending. It's again one of these movies that ends on one of its absolute best jokes, which is pretty hard to do. So, in conclusion,
let's rank the dictators. W.C. Fields as the president of Klopstokia. Very good for his country. Really cares about the country, does what he can, goes to the Olympics, lifts all the weights he can. Actually quite a good leader. Groucho as the president of Fredonia, really maybe possibly the worst leader of a country. Well, I mean, we've seen a little bit worse, but really bad, very bad.
Shockingly, who ultimately in the end did the most good for this world?
It wasn't Wheeler and Woolsey.
It really wasn't. It seems like it was, from everything we've said, that they brought peace to the peace convention. They got everybody to agree to peace. But actually, it turned out the peace document was forged, or, you know, it's, again, very hard to explain, but nobody really bought the peace document. It didn't take effect. It didn't catch on. It didn't take. And because of the scandal that it brought about, it actually ended up launching a war, and they end up getting drafted. And that's how it ends. So I was sort of been happy.
It's almost like they're setting up a sequel. Wheeler and Woolsey in the Army is the next one. It's like, I think I'll skip that one.
I mean, Duck Soup really isn't a happy ending because there was a war. I assume people died.
Many must have died in Fredonia. Yeah.
Harpo was recruiting them into this too. He was out there with a sandwich board going, "Come join the army."
You join the army, see the Navy.
And I was a little disappointed.
No, the only happy ending is $1 Million Legs, in which they save the day completely.
The couple get married, you can assume, and anyway, go watch Great Dictator. Go watch Great Dictator because your brain needs that. I rewatched some of that, and man, that final scene, that speech is, boy, does that hold up. Boy, do we need to hear that speech. We do.
I've always found it cloying. Maybe I need to give it another try. I've always found it. Well, I've always found complex. I've always found Chaplin cloying. I've never really dug Chaplin at all.
That final scene is just really a thing of beauty.
Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, We need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent and all will be lost.
And it really is something we need to hear still today. A lot of it is. And then the other thing is, of course, go watch Dr. Strangelove, because, yeah, and we'll see you again soon.